Happy politics. And no, you have not successfully yet made it to the long weekend. There is still the rest of this day to go. And to help you get there, this is another fun-filled edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of this fine publication, and welcome to my living room. I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
Jordan Bateman, VP Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Welcome to my little office studio.
Which is, more professional than my living room. What you can't see is the Lego and block fortress. Ian has made this is true actually, a block version of the legislature, unbidden by me.
Man. You guys are such nerds over there. What you can't see here is my Green Bay Packers shrine. They're 4-0, McLean, just saying.
That's you canvassed this extensively on Tuesday. Let's start with a column by the province's most established and well-respected columnist, Vaughn Palmer. Premier Dad versus Premier Us and Them. Jordan, I think you have some pretty strong thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have some strong feelings on this. I think this story kind of emerged. We should give some credit to Adam Sterling first. Somehow Sterling got a hold of the candidates' communication spin guide for the NDP and helpfully posted photos of every page for those of us who don't get the NDP publications. And essentially it had like coded language, like it's never, it's us versus them. We're with the people, they're with the 2%, Wilkinson's added touch, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff you typically see. And that is not by any stretch a nefarious, dirty trick. Every sophisticated campaign has it. Even unsophisticated ones like our TransLink referendum campaign, we had words that we would use to describe. For example, it was always the Arbutus subway, because Arbutus sounds fancier than UBC. Things like that. So that is fine. I have no problem with that. But it does give lie to the idea that he's Premier Dad. And, over the past 3 years, John Horgan has sort of skated with this reputation. He's got his temper under control. He's got dad jokes. He likes Captain Janeway and Star Trek. And Premier Dad is just looking out for everyone. Vaughn is right that there's a shift. But I would argue that Premier Dad was always just a complete myth anyways. It was a hoax. It was fake news. And McLean, here's the thing. After 16 years of BC Liberals being in power, after 16 years of the reporters having to talk to those same old people, right? Rich Coleman, Shirley Bond, Mike DeYoung, like all those folks they had to keep talking to. The new group came in, it was like a breath of fresh air. Not because they were particularly intelligent or better than the last group, but it's just someone new to talk to. I don't have to call Todd Stone, right? I get to call someone new. Oh, thank God. So there was a little bit of that. There's the natural honeymoon that comes when you get elected. There was the fact that, they had this CASA agreement and it gave him this cloak, like Horgan, this cloak, like, oh, I'm trying to help everyone get along, when actually he was just trying to buy off his opposition. Andrew Weaver suddenly developed a giant man crush on John Horgan. They're going to rugby games together. They're best buds. A relationship that was birthed by Sonia first to know his upset tummy turns into this wonderful bromance, and off they go. So there was all those different little pieces, and then there was this piece. He just. There was one more I can't remember. The honeymoon was the big one. The media coverage was another, and so he got away with it. The problem was, it was always a myth. It has always been us versus them with John Horgan. And certainly with Jeff Meggs behind the scenes, certainly with a number of his key ministers, it is always us versus them. And the proof is in cutting out 85% of the construction industry from big projects simply because they weren't members of the unions that gave John Horgan's NDP $2.5 million over a series of elections. The DNA is there. It's always us versus them. And now you're seeing the facade ripped apart. Will it be in time for this election? Who knows? But there will be consequences down the road for John Horgan. This election call was extremely selfish. He put his job ahead of the jobs of thousands of other British Columbians, put his job ahead of the health of thousands of other British Columbians. We're now up to close to 2,000 people who've come down with COVID since he called the election 16 days ago. Almost 20% of the cases of COVID in BC have come in the past 2 weeks, not the last 6 months. So, there's a lot happening here. But this idea that he was ever Premier Dad, that was more media myth than actual truth.
Whether you think it's myth or not, the change in tone the last few weeks has been remarkable. It's like, do you know, you mentioned some of the messaging points that Adam Sterling got and Vaughn wrote about, us versus them and the 2% and the wealthy, the well-connected and all that. it reminded me of, years and years and years ago when I made money on the side doing copywriting before I, had a real job. And in the early days of search engine optimization, and where you just have to hit the same keyword over and over and over again, and you'd find like increasingly terribly obvious ways to shoehorn words in there. That's what his answers and speeches have sounded like in the last few days. It's just going back and over and over and over again, like the wealthy, the well-connected. They only care about this and da-da-da. And we're for you, and it doesn't sound natural. It sounds like what it is, like an attempt to hit at least 6 of these 10 keywords in every sentence.
That's an interesting observation. I'm not watching every Horgan speech like you are, and God bless you for your service to this province, having to put up with that, Maclean. But that is interesting. Like, the great political campaigners will always, especially the backroom people, always talk about how candidates who have the tape recorder in their head. They have the message for the day or the week or the month or the campaign they want to get out. And they go back to it. Christy Clark, debt-free BC, LNG, we're going to do it all. 2013 being the most prominent example because, frankly, she was probably the most gifted politician of her generation as far as the messaging and comm side. Didn't help her in 2017, but nonetheless, here we are. So, that tape recorder in the head going around and around, and, you learn. I learned it at the Taxpayers Federation. You always bridge back to your core message. Whatever the question is, we stand in support of lower taxes, less waste, and more government accountability. That really frames all the work that we do. You just go back to that message over and over again. Yeah. And, you dare the media to run a clip that isn't that.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And the genius part of it, or where you reference Christy Clark, and there's other great retail politicians out there you could mention. The hard part is not getting back to the messaging, or is not saying the messaging. The hard part is bridging back to the messaging. Yep. That's where you see the difference between really good politicians and, quite frankly, clunky and sloppy ones. I mean, anyone can say, if I ask you a question, it's easy to just parrot, well, da-da-da-da-da-da, here's what I have to say. The trick is addressing the question and then, as you say, bridging back to the messaging. That's hard. Yeah. And I mean, that's a skill you can learn. But John Horgan has been a talented retail politician, but as I say, the last couple of weeks, it's felt clunky. It's felt obvious. It's felt like he's reading lists of words he has to say in any particular order.
Yeah. I don't sense he's having a lot of fun on this campaign trail. And look, he shouldn't. This is a selfish campaign. He put himself first. In his heart of hearts, he knows he's lying to people. And that's hard to spin. Like, it's hard for you to dig out of that. So it is an interesting phenomenon. The NDP campaign also has been very sloppy. Today, a news release goes out talking about, we have a big announcement in North Vancouver. We're going to expand, shipbuilding operations. It's the classic BC, like every election campaign, every platform has the same thing. We are going to make British Columbia, the number one shipbuilder in all the world, right? Like it is classic. The funny thing about this is it was datelined Langley, which there is no sea in Langley. I love Langley. There's no ocean in Langley. So unless they're building it on the Fraser River, it's a mistake. This was the same party that was already giving Langley a bit of a complex because they confused Fraser Highway with Highway 1, which no one has ever done. So I'm not sure what that's about. So it's sloppy. When you're on a campaign trail and you're exhausted and feeling pressure, and even though you're maybe ahead in the polls, you feel that stitch in your hip, right? Like, the attacks stick. It's not fun. And I don't think I look at the few photo ops I've seen of John Horgan, the few speeches I've seen, I don't get the sense that he's enjoying himself. And it comes down to, because you're premier us versus them, instead of getting to just kind of dad joke your way through whatever. You don't get to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he said himself in his own words earlier in his term that he didn't like being in opposition. He didn't like having to do all that stuff, whether it comes naturally to him or not.
He loved kicking the crap out of people.
He did,
but he didn't like losing.
He didn't like getting the crap kicked out of him. I mean, in every media availability he's had in the last couple of weeks, it's been here's the announcement, and then the question is usually something that makes him squirm, and that he has not enjoyed.
The media fumbled his $1,000 thing. Andrew Wilkinson a week earlier says we're going to cut the PST, and everyone's asking, well, what services will you cut to pay for it? this guy says he's going to give $1,000 to every British Columbian, which, by the way, is a lie. It's only to British Columbians and families making less than $125,000 a year. So for you teachers out there who are married to each other, or a cop married to a teacher, or a firefighter married to a longshoreman, it ain't happening. You ain't getting your $1,000. So, because you're one of the wealthy 2%ers, apparently. Anyways, I lost my track there. I was getting so angry about that. Oh, no one bothered to ask Horgan.
What services
are you going to cut to pay for that? You know, like the Liberals should have come out almost and said, after that announcement, said, you know what? John Horgan clearly has money squirreled away in this budget that we are unaware of and that he has not disclosed to the public. He's been sitting on this announcement for a long time and he can afford it. Therefore, we will do the PST cut and we will match that $1,000 cut, that $1,000 rebate. And then when they turn around and the media turn around, how are you going to pay for it? You say, ask John Horgan. He's the one who invented it. Yeah. He says he's got the dough, so let's do it. And like,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, well,
it's not too late. Yeah, it's not too late.
It's not too late. Like, just come out and say, you know, we've been reviewing the books, and very clearly, John Horgan is not. He's been fudging some of these numbers or holding back on how much money is available to support. So we are going to match. Like, why not?
Well, and you know what? The genius of that idea is, aside from it being brilliant retail politics, is that when you are in the opposition in a, you know, snap election, there's a lot of, you know, well, how come we didn't think of this before? Because we weren't planning for an election. We were focused on working with the government on COVID response. Yeah. And there's a million things you can say that almost like, what do you mean? Of course, we just thought of this recently. Yep. We weren't expecting a snap election. And as you say, go ask the premier.
I would do it with that. And I would do it with childcare. I would out childcare the NDP. I'd say, look, women have bore the brunt of this. And working parents in general have bore the brunt of this recession because we've, you know, had to teach kids while we're doing all the, you know, and entertain them in ways because we don't have access to all these things. Therefore, we're going to go harder into childcare. We're going to out childcare these. You know, these guys can only produce 16% of their spaces. We're going to do much better. Like, why not?
Bridge tolls, 2017. Famous story about how they decided, the NDP decided literally in the war room, okay, well, we're just going to do this, find a way to make it work.
Yeah, as their operatives were out there on Twitter shredding Christy Clark for capping at 500 because it was going to destroy the environment by causing more cars on the road. And then, you know, an hour or two later, oh, no, we didn't mean it. We were just joking. What a visionary plan by John Horgan to cut tolls. Like, this is really for the common person, right?
So it's free advice if you're listening over at BC Liberal HQ. I think it's good advice.
So I looked at the NDP platform, and you know I'm an old fiscal conservative, so you know I flip through the first 50 pages of BS, and I get to the table. Like, how are you funding this? These guys didn't even put in a deficit projection for year 2 or year 3. So they're not. It's not a fully costed platform. It has some random price tags attached to it, but there's nothing in there. So if you're the Liberals, you should say, you know, if anyone ever asks you, do you have a costed platform? You should say, we'll do ours when we see the government actually produce one of theirs. Like, you got the cover now. Like, and for me, even as fiscal conservative, in the worst economic crisis in 100 years, I'm sitting here going, guys, I'm not sure it matters if it's a $13 billion deficit or a $16 billion deficit.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, does it matter? Like, 13 billion is important enough to me. 16 billion is no more important. Like, you do what you got to do. We can bridge to this next topic, but there's a piece today in the Vancouver Sun. I think the Board of Trade did a survey, and Metro Vancouver businesses, 1 in 4 say they don't expect to exist a year from now. 1 in 4. So I've just written a post for ICBA's Facebook. It'll go up tomorrow. And I'm encouraging people that I linked to the article, and I'm encouraging people like this Thanksgiving weekend, when you're out and about picking up that last minute pumpkin pie, or going for a walk with your bubble, your 6-person bubble, not your 80, 200-person school cohort, whatever. You know, when you're out and about, take a look around at all of the shuttered businesses already. And realize that business there, that little nail salon that's closed down, or that little restaurant that isn't reopening, or that coffee shop that didn't make it, that was someone's life dream. That was someone's entrepreneur going out there saying, I'm going to take a risk. I believe in my community. I believe in my product, my service, my location, my business plan. And they're out of business today, not because any of those failed, but because of COVID. And because government was so slow to react to help them. And because government, frankly, right now is got these businesses on a tax deferral cliff and has locked up support because we're having a snap election because John Horgan is selfish about his job, but doesn't really give a rat's ass about yours. Sorry, I have a friend who listens to the podcast, Lisa, and she likes it when I swear. She says she giggles because, so Lisa, there you go, rat's ass will be the swear for this one. But, so, and then I said in this Facebook post, now, look at the other 4 businesses around that business and decide which one of them should be out of business. Because one of them is going under. And these numbers match what the Business Council of BC told us at the beginning. 1 in 4 businesses that started 2020 probably won't see the beginning of 2022. Like, these are people's lives and dreams, and it sets back the entrepreneur years financially, and with confidence and emotionally, and it sets back the employees. Like, we need to do more for these folks, and we just don't.
Hey, and if you're watching or listening, we had a little technical glitch there. So if you're hearing an abrupt shift, you're right. You just did, but we're back now. Yeah. Let's move on to the next subject. One thing we haven't really talked about a lot in this election campaign, because it happened so abruptly, is there are a number of significant and noteworthy politicians that are not running again on, all 3 sides, really. Are there any in particular that you feel aren't getting enough attention right now?
Well, there's 2 that I want to mention because I know them personally and have a lot of respect and affection for them. One is Ralph Sultan. You wrote an excellent piece. It pains me that Ralphie doesn't get one last address in the legislature, one last chance.
Yeah.
You almost wish that in between the election day and the votes being counted and the election certified, could we have one more day in the ledge where all of these politicians could come and give one last speech? Sultan, the 7 ministers or whatever who bowed out. It would be nice. It sounds weird because who cares who remembers these speeches? But it's a chance for closure for those folks, people who have given a lot, no matter what side you're on. Andrew Weaver, a chance for you to say, goodbye. And frankly, John Horgan robbed them of that opportunity with his selfish election call. See, I'm not John Horgan's not the only one who can say words over and over again until they sink into people's brains. He's selfish, and it was a selfish election call.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Ralph. I mean, it's when I wrote about Ralph, and I have believed this for a long time, and I still believe it, is that if you asked, a secret ballot of all the MLAs, all of them in the legislature, who's your favorite? I genuinely believe Ralph might win a plurality of that vote. I mean, he's held in a lot of respect and genuine affection by members of all 3 parties, and I mean, if you know Ralph, it's not hard to understand why. He's a genuinely decent guy. His experience is legitimately unique, and he's also hysterically funny.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a shame that he won't get his send off, because actually, you know what, it would have been an emotional one, and I think he would have. I would have looked forward to hearing the speech from the other 2 parties about him.
Yeah.
Because I think that would have been really interesting and well worth hearing. And then for Ralph, it's an even bigger shame because he won't get to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. And I suspect Bo and Ma might have got tapped for that. One of the younger MLAs speaking about the oldest. There's nice symmetry there.
Yeah. Well, and Bo and Ma wished him happy birthday a couple of years ago in the ledge, and I mean, I'm making it sound like she just got up and said happy birthday, but she actually made Ralph cry. With what she said about him. So I mean, that's probably exactly who would have done it.
Yeah. Then the other person I want to talk about is my friend Rich Coleman, a longtime 20-something year member. Not a lot of people have served 20 plus years in the legislature. So there's that. And Coleman, I've already nailed him down, Maclean. I don't know if I'll do this as an ICBA thing or if the Orca would want to do it, but Coleman has promised me the definitive Rich Coleman exit interview. So in between, after election day, before the votes are counted, he and I are going to sit and I'll interview him on video and ask him all the questions that Bob Mackin never could get through and ask him. We'll go through his career and do all that. But Coleman and I were sitting around swapping stories because, of course, I was his riding president for a time and have helped him over the years, and he's helped me politically when I was a township councillor and vice versa. 2 great memories of Coleman come to mind. And of Coleman country. So, I think I joined Rich's team in 2002. I guess when I really started to volunteer and help. And I was the last person to come in. He's had the same group of folks who have helped him from the 90s on. A real testament to not just the loyalty. Loyalty is a high value for him. Loyalty to his leader, loyalty to his party, loyalty to his constituents. Other people feel that loyalty to him, which has been an interesting outflow from that kind of life. But 2 stories come to mind. One is he was blathering at the front at one of our AGMs. It was right after the 2001 election. 77 seats of 79 went to Gordon Campbell and the BC Liberals. Historic landslide. And I'm sitting next to an old winery owner named Gary Taylor, who's since passed away. And the Liberals had this thing where every couple of years you had to like vote in confidence for the leader. So the ballots come around, and the guy's won 77 of 79 seats. So I vote yes. I look at Gary, he votes no. And I'm like, Gary, what are you doing? He's like, he should have won 79. But that was kind of Coleman country, right? Like that was our mindset. Like we should win them all. Like what can we do? Shirley Bond's dad, mom or father passes away, and Rich Coleman passes the hat, collects enough money from MLAs to charter a plane, and they surprise her in Prince George by all 40 or 50 or whatever the caucus was at the time, getting off the plane and going to the funeral for Shirley. Like stuff like that matters. Like that was a big deal. The other thing is my first week as a Langley Township councillor, I don't even think I'm sworn in yet. He calls me, counselor. I'm like, oh boy. He only called me counselor when he was mad. He says to me, my basement's flooded because this township can't get a proper sewage system in Aldergrove. So I say, well, Rich, or I say, well, Minister, if only the provincial government would properly fund local government infrastructure, we could help you. A few months later, we had a grant from the provincial government to help us with getting water and sewer out to Aldergrove. So those are two little stories that kind of come to mind about that.
I mean, in the interest of covering all the political bases, two other we should probably mention. Carol James leading for the worst possible reason, diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Respected across party lines, and preparing a budget with Parkinson's disease is an accomplishment that man, I simply know that I couldn't ever have done. The other one, of course, is Andrew Weaver, who might go down as one of the most significant two-term MLAs in BC history who never served in government, kind of served in government. And I will miss his press, his media availabilities. The man was a quote machine like no other. You didn't miss when he got up and spoke to the media, because the chances are he's going to say something. And it'll be a less colorful place without the good doctor.
Yeah, that's true. Weaver had a little streak of Bill Bennett, modern day Bill Bennett, not 80s Bill Bennett in him, where he had to go because he didn't know what they were going to say. It was just too juicy not to hear. I'm sure Doc Weaver will still be texting you and emailing you from time to time, pontificating on BC politics. So I doubt you're off the hook.
Oh well, I always enjoy his calls because they're very entertaining talks. I will miss the good doctor.
And look, I don't like him. I think he was a turncoat and only in it for himself. But Gerald Plekis is another big name who, because he's not attached to any party, has not been discussed very much. I hope he takes Alan Mullen with him, but whatever. We'll see. The next speaker has an interesting decision there about their chief of staff, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. That's a really good point, actually. So we'll see. That'll be a good story for a month or two from now.
Yes, the Alan Mullen exit interview will also be highly sought after.
The last thing we should talk about before we let everyone go off to Thanksgiving is the three-party leaders will probably not be having a restful Thanksgiving. Not only will they be campaigning, but the single most important event of this campaign happens on Tuesday, and that is, of course, the televised three-way leaders debate. You've been in and around some of campaign prep for these kinds of things. What are John Horgan, Andrew Wilkinson, and Sonia Furstenau going to be going through this weekend?
So there's kind of three paths that can happen. Number one is you wing it. That is not recommended. Number two, by the way, let me just say before we get too deep into this debate talk, if I'm ever in some sort of debate, I'm going to go to the moderator and say, look, if a fly lands on my head, can you just give me this signal here? And I'll just, because I just want to know. I just want to know. All right. Second, there is kind of the question technique. So there's you sit around a board table, 4 or 5 of your policy folks, and you're kind of comms person, the person's kind of running debate prep with the candidate, and you sort of lob questions at them, get a sense of their answers, try to retool them slightly. I was involved in one of these with Kevin Falcon during his leadership race. And just kind of Kevin, what do you think of this? And he would answer, and then, we'd sort of fine tune, what about this point? Or maybe you should weave in that point or bridge back to this message. So kind of, more like a conversation, just try to get the candidate feeling comfortable with what questions will be lobbed. The third is was invented and patented by the Americans. They take debates very seriously, as we've seen. And that is the full-on, you have podiums, you set up something exactly like what they're going to space on TV, and you have campaigner staff standing in as the other candidates, and you do a full-on debate. And you stop it sometimes and work with the candidate on answers. I've never been involved in that kind of one. I hear that you have once. You were a fly on the hair in one once. But that to me sounds like really interesting, and it's time consuming, it's energy consuming.
It is.
But man, if you do it right, you're really prepared for anything.
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's kind of like, if you're in theater or dress rehearsal, where, you can sit around a table and run through your lines, and that's good preparation, but it's much different when you're in costume and you have to do the sword fight or whatever it is. And it's a different feeling when you're standing behind a podium and there's a light in front of your face that you can't simulate by, again, sitting around a kitchen table with your friends. So I hope that all three party leaders are doing that. The other thing, two things I should add to that. One is that, yes, a tremendous amount of campaign resources in terms of time and probably a few dedicated staff goes into debate prep, more than you probably think. And, binders and binders and binders of briefing materials go into these things because you never know what you're going to get asked about, especially if you're in government and you have, a record to defend. The other thing is that we in the media are very guilty of judging debates based on, we're always looking for a knockout blow. Mm-hmm. And that's how a debate is judged to be good or bad for the leader. You either win or you lose. And there actually are rarely true knockout blows in debates. I mean, there's been a few. The Brian Mulroney, John Turner is probably the most famous. But for the most part, the candidates are very well aware that they are going to be judged on a single soundbite out of half an hour or an hour. And so a lot of the sniping you see in the debates that we all pretend to deplore is them looking for that knockout shot, because everything else that happens, if they get it, everything else doesn't matter. Yeah. They can ignore questions entirely if they get that one zinger that they know is going to dominate the clips. So that's what they're looking for. And so, if you want more reasoned, more intelligent debates, then we have to start talking about them, differently and looking at the answers, questions and answers separately and sort of judging it more holistically as a whole. But instead, we're going to talk about who had the best zinger. And we're all guilty of that. And that goes into the prep, and that goes into the tone you see in debates.
Yeah, there's also the expectations game, right? Like, what do you expect from him? So, John Horgan comes in. He's the premier of the province of British Columbia. He stood up in question period. He's premier dad, now premier us versus them. What is the expectation for him? Well, the expectation is he knows what the hell's going on in government, and he's going to be able to articulate that properly. John Horgan is not a homework guy. So the binders and binders of policy stuff, yeah, maybe he's glancing through it. Maybe he's going for the one pages at the beginning. He's not digging into the nuts and bolts of Adrian Dix's $1.5 billion healthcare improvement plan that was rolled out. He just isn't. He's not memorizing 250,000 pieces of PPE and all those kind of little facts and figures. He'll have a few, but really he's going, that's not him. He's not going to do it. Andrew Wilkinson, on the other hand, as we saw in the prop rep debate, will know every detail of everything because he has that kind of memory and he is that kind of, he will go comb through these things. He will be ready with every detail. Now, it doesn't necessarily help. I mean, we saw Trump versus Clinton. One candidate did their homework. One candidate shot from the lip. We know who's president today. So, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. The person with the best chance to overperform here, of course, is Sonia Furstenau. She's only been off, in leadership for 3 weeks now, or 4 weeks. I think she might be at her 1 month anniversary. Congratulations to her.
Getting close, yeah.
Yeah, but no one's going into this debate going, boy, I'm really expecting Sonia Furstenau to knock it out of the park. No, we're expecting Sonia Furstenau to look aggrieved at John Horgan, but she can really put Horgan on his heels. If she goes to, you broke your word, why should we believe you? You lied to us, why should we believe you? You lied to British Columbians, why should we believe you? You lied, you misled, you fibbed, you broke your word, you shredded, you ripped up the contract. Those kind of statements will pile up, and it will. The risk for Horgan is if Premier, if Hulk Horgan is starting to reemerge here in any way, that bubble's over. Now, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
What was it that Christie had written on the top of her debate document, remember? Be humble or something? Oh, no, it was the speech after.
That wasn't debate, but yeah,
Yes.
there was a be humble. Yeah.
Be humble. I guarantee you John Horgan's going to have on his, be nice or be premier dad or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Don't get mad, right? That will be the number one thing. John, you can do anything you want in this debate, but do not lose your temper.
Especially at Sonia Furstenau.
Especially Sonia Furstenau.
Yeah, he probably could get away with getting mad at Andrew Wilkinson, but no, he can't get mad at Sonia Furstenau. If I'm the Greens, everything you just said, I agree with. If I'm the Greens, I encourage Sonia Furstenau to use the L word. Don't say dishonest. Don't say misled. I would just say you lied.
Yeah.
And like that's the sentence. 2 words, and let it hang there.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Let that silence be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Let there be a void. Let Horgan rush in to fill the vacuum. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Make your case.
He'll rush in. You're right.
You told us this. You told us this. You told us this. John, you lied.
Yeah. You looked me in the eye and you said we would go to October 2021, and you lied.
That's what I would do. And it's important to use that word.
Yeah. And then Wilkinson, just stay out of it. And then at the end of it, say, he did lie. And he selfishly put his job ahead of the jobs of every British Columbian watching tonight. And that will drive him crazy. That will drive Horgan bananas. Now, he'll control it. I think he probably will because the stakes are so high. Like, getting angry is the one thing he can't do. But lie is a powerful word. And he did lie. And the media won't say she overshot. The media will be like, he did lie. Finally, we can, say it out loud, right? Like, everyone's afraid of getting sued or something like that. The guy lied. He signed his name to a document and shredded the document for his own personal gain. That's a lie. So that has been reinforced over the campaign. Saying, well, I only got up on the Saturday after meeting with Sonia when I told her, everything was fine, and that's when I decided to have an election. Well, they had election ads filmed. Yeah. He was in election ads, weeks before that. I mean, obviously, there's something amiss here. Yeah. The other thing I would say is this. If you're out there watching this, watch the debate without your Twitter on.
Yeah.
Because,
it's a good point, actually.
I like you, Maclean. I like me, obviously. I'm great. Rob Shaw's fantastic. Apparently, Keith Baldry is the most influential BC Poly tweeter, according to one study. The Zussman Usda House is dominating Twitter. Whatever. Just shut up. Don't look at that. Watch the debate for yourself and make the decisions. I did this in 2013 in the Clark versus Dix debate. And I didn't have my Twitter on, and I just watched it. And I was like, Clark really dominated this. Dix's tie was askew, if you recall. His hair was a little bit rumpled. He was making weird, he wasn't connecting. I was like, wow, that's a real home run for Clark. And I flipped on the Twitter after, and the media was so invested in the Dix camp, Dix can kick a puppy and still win the election, that it was all Dix dominated. I was like, what? What were they watching? I do not see that at all. But it was because they'd heard all of Christie's lines before so many times.
Yeah.
But for the average British Columbian, it was the first time you heard it. And guess what? The Liberals brilliantly the next day, the comeback kid, the picture of her on the front of the 24 Hours newspaper, which was hilarious. And she did come back. And that was a major turning point in an election that he couldn't lose. And he lost. So, turn off the Twitter and just watch. Just watch. Who cares what Lisa uses saying this, or Tanya Fletcher, or those guys? Just turn it off and watch. You can check out their tweets after.
I would put it like this. I wouldn't say don't care about what reporters
I don't care.
I would frame it differently. Here's what I would say. I agree with you, but this is what I would say: is that your point about how they are used to this campaign and the people involved. It is impossible for people like Richard Zussman, Tanya Fletcher, myself, to look at those 3 people with fresh eyes. We can't do it. We've been hearing them talk literally every day for a month, and almost every day for 3 years. And so, yes, you're right. We do have a tendency to get sick of the same lines over and over and over again. And but for your point about most viewers will be seeing this for the first time with fresh eyes. I mean, you can't unsee things if you're a reporter or you're covering them every day. So yeah, you're right. Not fresh eyes. The people you shouldn't care about during the debate are you know who you are, the partisans. Of course,
care what I say. You should care what I say.
No, but I mean, there's going to be talented politicos in the NDP war room, in the BC Liberal war room, in the Green war room, who are going to be saying da-da-da-da-da-da. That's their opinion no matter what. You know what their opinion is before they're going to say it. That's what you need to worry about on Twitter.
Bill Thielman will tweet out, for some reason, comparing Wilkinson to either Pence or Trump or both. Oh, he's interrupting John Horgan, just like Donald Trump did. Bill Thielman will have this quote over the head. John Horgan, home run, this election's over, let's go, right? Like, but we did that before. Like, it's like was it the Babylon Bee had a satire headline ahead of the U.S. presidential debate, and it was like, CNN reports 95% of Americans think Biden won the debate. And it was like 24 hours before the debate happened, right? Like, that is the problem.
Yeah, so I mean that's the stuff you're going to see on Twitter, and the problem is that some of these politicos are going to do it in a humorous way, and you're going to get sucked in. They're going to have funny memes. They're going to be on all three sides, and you'll be like, oh yeah, ha ha ha. But you're right. Most viewers aren't watching with Twitter. Most viewers will just be watching, and they'll say, well, that's a good point, and how come he's saying that? And it is important for those of us in the bubble to remember that we are in a bubble.
Yes. Always remember, you're in a bubble, a 6-person bubble.
Yeah, that's true. Man.
I want to submit one more thing. This campaign has there's been a lot of ideas. There's been absolutely no traction with the public that I can see because we're all concerned about more important things. And that's why John Horgan called it. Here's what I would say. I think that if Sonia Furstenow's tummy doesn't get upset and Andrew Wilkinson is, or whoever Kirsty Clark's replacement was, is the Premier of British Columbia today, that they enjoy a double-digit lead in the polls. I don't think, based on, because they wouldn't have changed anything Dr. Bonnie did, and we'd still be doing well.
No.
That is the thing that Horgan is riding on more than anything else. And, Doug Ford's popular. Like, Francois Legault is popular, and Quebec's a disaster. Like,
True.
Everywhere except for Alberta, where Rachel Notley bucked the trend and decided to criticize, as you wrote, during an election campaign, or during a COVID. Everywhere else, the incumbent is ahead. And I think it's just, we Canadians, we want to rally to something bigger than we are, and we want to rally to this fight against COVID. So we just assume, our numbers have been better than other places, so we presume he's doing a pretty good job. That is the systemic advantage he has. I don't think, he has a 12-point lead if you believe this latest poll because his, $1,000 plan is so great, or his economic recovery plan is so great, or, whatever other thing he's promised is so great. No, I think it's because, as we saw from the fun story about Bonnie Henry's numbers, it's really because of the handling of COVID. And again, if the Liberals were in charge, they'd be the ones 12 points up.
Yeah, I think there's some implicit recognition of that. I mean, was it a few months ago, was it Bowen Ma tweeted something to the effect of, oh, thank God the BC Liberals aren't in power. And I mean, imagine what they would have done with COVID response. And even the response from her side was kind of like, that's
Adrian Dix shot that down pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, they've been cooperating. There's absolutely nothing to suggest things would be any different. They appointed Dr. Bonnie Henry. Yeah. They just, no. And then she, kind of... very transparently, I'm only apologizing because I've been told to apologize. Apology. We've all seen those before. Yeah. But I mean, so there's been some recognition of that out there that that's not a good. That's not something for the NDP. They don't want to shine too closely a spotlight on that because I think you're right. It's if Doug Ford can be popular for the way they're handling the COVID in Ontario, then there's nothing to suggest BC Liberals would have done any differently here.
Say Doug Ford was out today giving sex tips. Like this is not this is a world that I do not want to live in anymore. Like 2020 is the worst when Doug Ford and the Ontario Ministry of Health are giving out like safe sex tips. None of us want to hear this. Like, come on, you're killing 2020. You're the worst. You are the worst. But here's what I would say long term. Let's say the NDP hold on and win this election. Long term, they're going to implement a very radical agenda. It's now Premier us versus them. It's not Premier for everyone. It's Premier us versus them. Their radical agenda, at some point COVID is going to have a vaccine and COVID will no longer be the major concern. They could actually annihilate themselves over the next 4 years if they interpret this mandate as some sort of blank check for all their crazy policies, like cutting 85% of construction workers out of all taxpayer-funded projects over $50 million. They are going to be held to a different standard that I'm not sure that they're prepared for. But who knows?
And I'm not prepared for it a year from now when we're talking about why the birth rate in Ontario has gone down to 0. But that's a problem for another day.
Doug Ford, gross.
I don't have anything left. I don't have anything left at all after that. I mean, that is an image that I am aggressively fighting to keep out of my head. Have anything else till Tuesday?
Happy politics.
All right. If you've been listening, you can follow us anywhere you podcast And you're probably also listening to the Jody Vance, Rob Shaw Unspun episode, which was excellent. And
it's like Hot Stove. It's like Hot Stove, but smarter.
Yeah. And actually, there's a charming origin story of how the two of them first met. Couldn't recommend it highly enough. But until next week, I'm Maclean K. He's Jordan Bateman. And instead of happy politics, I'm going to say happy Thanksgiving. Until next time.